Street Fighter 6 is shaping up to be one of the most anticipated fighting games in the genre's entire history, with there being all sorts of reasons that people are looking forward to this game. Part of the charm of this classic series for many is its memorable characters, with the likes of Street Fighter 2 introducing some of the most recognisable combatants in gaming history. Who could ever forget the sinister M.Bison, the iconic psycho-power wielding dictator who would grace us with his imposing presence for many decades to come. As frightening as this foe was, I think the challenger waiting in the next installment in the series may be even more terrifying. While dictators and warmongers have always caused problems for humanity, the likes of what Street Fighter 6's main antagonist represents is far closer to home, especially in today's modern world. Dictators, generals, and world leaders come and go, often disposed of at the hands of the people. But the ultra-rich global elite wield more power and influence over this planet than any elected official could ever dream of. So with all of that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the terrifying truth about Street Fighter 6's JP, the most dangerous and realistic villain in the series' history. Back in June of 2022, the internet broke into a frenzy thanks to leaked images which would expose the entire roster of the upcoming Street Fighter 6 game. Not only were most people's all-time favourites back from Street Fighter 2, but pictures and names would also show off completely brand new characters amongst this selection of challengers. Out of all of these, one would stand out to fans as almost unmistakably Street Fighter 6's main villain. The design of this character, simply labelled as JP, just oozed final boss energy, way before anyone had ever even seen him in combat. Pictured in a dapper pink waist jacket, with a cane seemingly to beat people with, and a face reminiscent of Lord Saruman from Lord of the Rings, JP was clearly an imposing figure who would be sure to make an impact on the brand. Using the limited information we could identify about this character, fans would instantly consider what the simple initials of JP actually meant. Looking at this character's apparent age and how he dressed and looked to be carrying himself, people would speculate he was named after JP Morgan, which now, knowing even more about this character, certainly seems could be true. But to catch you up, just so you know I'm not talking any rubbish, let's talk about who JP Morgan actually was. JP Morgan was an influential American financier and banker in the late 19th and early 20th century. He played a significant role in shaping the modern financial system and consolidating industries through his company JP Morgan & Co. While this is all very well and good, Morgan was considered controversial for several reasons. First, he was involved in several high-profile mergers and acquisitions, which led to concerns about his growing concentration of economic power and the potential for monopolistic practices. Critics argued that his actions stifled competition and harmed smaller businesses. Essentially, this JP became extremely powerful at the expense of ordinary people. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. It would be in 1907 when the crap would really hit the fan, when a financial crisis occurred in the United States. Known as the Panic of 1907, a series of events including individuals trying to corner the stock market caused a liquidity shortage and led to a run on banks. Morgan's involvement in the crisis drew attention and controversy. His concentration of power and influence over the economy was criticised, as his actions effectively allowed a private individual to exert significant control during a crisis. Due to this, the Financial Reserve was created in 1913 to prevent future crises and stop people like Morgan from becoming so powerful. Despite this, Morgan's immense wealth and political influence raised questions about money's influence on democracy. His close ties with political leaders and his ability to shape policies and regulations created perceptions of an unfair advantage for the wealthy elite. So circling back around to Street Fighter's JP, the Capcom official website describes the character as the head of an international non-government organisation responsible for many investment projects, a description that you could attach to either this JP or JP Morgan interchangeably. Witnessing JP in combat and his trailer footage reveals even more details about this character and his dubious and selfish intentions. In battle, JP shows immense cruelty and sadism, but what is most striking about this fighter is his two-faced nature. While appearing well dressed and polite on the surface, JP fights holding one hand behind his back. The hidden hand of JP glows with psycho power, the same energy carried by the evil M.Bison. The key difference between JP and Bison though is at least Bison was upfront about his dark desires. JP on the other hand hides his true intentions, dismissing concerns from others whenever they are addressed. Known as the regal businessman, JP fights primarily with a combination of kicks and cane strikes, but can take advantage of his hidden hand to summon portals, spikes, and spectres to do his bidding on his behalf. JP's combat style, like JP himself, completely revolves around controlling his surroundings. By doing so, he can keep people away from him and attack them safely from a comfortable distance. Perhaps his most terrifying move is known as the Interdiction, an attack which sees him warp in front of an opponent and destroy them with a psycho power infused choke that detonates with his cane. JP, full name Johan Petrovich, in my opinion really is a frightening villain and a highly realistic one at that. What makes him even more scary is that people like JP and non-government organisations tend to behave in exactly the same way in real life as they do in the Street Fighter universe. JP, for example, builds power and influence under the guise of investments that are good for humanity through a group known as the Terra Network Partners, an entity that upon further inspection are no different to that of the World Economic Forum. Now, what's so sinister about these sort of groups, you may ask? Well, the WEF promotes itself as an international organisation that aims to improve the state of the world by bringing together business leaders, politicians and other influential figures to discuss and develop solutions to global problems. But the truth of it is, it only really exists to make the rich and powerful more rich and powerful. The World Economic Forum have helped form a detached elite who often view themselves as international rather than associating themselves with a particular country. Political scientist Samuel P. Huntington said it best when he stated, "These types have little need for national loyalty, view national boundaries as obstacles, and see national governments as residues from the past, whose only useful function is to facilitate the elite's global operations." Many view the World Economic Forum's main purpose, which is occupied by real-life JPs, existing to function as a socialising institution for the emerging global elite, a group of people who consist of a mafiocracy of bankers, industrialists, oligarchs, technocrats and politicians. They exist to promote common ideas and serve common interests, their own ideas and own interests. While NGO heads continue to promote virtuous messages on the stage at the WEF, the 2019 report known as Public Good or Private Wealth stated that 2,200 billionaires worldwide saw their wealth grow by 12%, while the poorest half saw its wealth fall by 11%. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I believe that these billionaires generally do want to come up with global solutions to help humanity, when the statistics show that at present, the rest of society is getting poorer, while they're the ones in charge getting richer. Other critics have seen the WEF's attention to goals like environmental protection and social entrepreneurship as mere window dressing to disguise its true plutocratic nature and goals. A writer in the German magazine Cicero wrote that the WEF cement its dominance of opinion and sedate ordinary people with maternalistic, paternalistic social benefits so that they are not disturbed by the common people when they steer. The French Les Echos adds, the elites at the World Economic Forum represents the exact values people rejected at the ballot box. It's cliche at this point, but who can forget these smug bastards arriving on 1,300 private jets in 2020 to discuss how to make the general public prevent climate change of all things. You couldn't write this stuff. The WEF's Global Redesign report highlights their selfish goals further, with it suggesting to create a public-private United Nations, in which selected agencies operate and steer global agendas under shared governance systems. It says that a globalised world is probably best managed by a coalition of multinational corporations, governments and civil society organisations, which it expresses through initiatives like the Great Reset. Who remembers that conspiracy? The reality was, though, this was simply a coronavirus-themed rebranding of all the terrible things that the WEF was already doing. Basically, just another greedy, selfish cash grab attempt at making themselves richer and trying to look good in the process. Truly horrible people. One thing is clear, JP is the most realistic villain in Street Fighter history, as unfortunately there are thousands of members of the global elite out there whose only true goal is to become more powerful under the guise of the greater good. These people may appear polite and well dressed, placing focus on positively connotated activist topics such as environmental protection and other things like that, but the reality is that each of them have a glowing purple psycho power imbued hand behind their back, which they are ready to strike you with to achieve their plutocratic goals and desires whenever they have the opportunity. Building on all of this, a study published in the Journal of Consumer Research investigated the sociological impact of the WEF. It concluded that the WEF did not solve issues such as poverty, global warming, chronic illness or debt. The forum has, according to the study, simply shifted the burden for the solution of these problems from governments and businesses to responsible consumers, the green consumer, the health-conscious consumer, and the financially literate consumer. So I guess that summarises the likes of JP and his real-life counterparts in a nutshell. These people simply exist to become as powerful and influential as possible, but want to attempt to continue looking good in the process. So, placing the blame on us, saying we are the ones who need to make the planet better is the best way to distract us from the unfair level of psycho power in which they all wield. For these reasons, JP is the most horrifying Street Fighter villain ever conceived, and not only is he a reflection of reality, but thus far we have been unable to defeat these people. Anyway, that was why JP is terrifying. Pretty deep, eh? If you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe, then check out my video on M.Bison now. Cheerio.